好，同志们，我们伟大的，我们是中国现在，China now. Friend or foe, war or peace? With your gang of two, Nan who is the senior investigative reporter for Epoch Times, and yours truly, Michael Olson, who was once going to be a China hand, but was dissuaded from doing so by the great helmsman himself, Mao Zedong. Well, Nansu, it's been a wild, wild week, as we had talked about in the first hour, with war in Iran and throughout the Middle East. And I guess it's been working up for to that extent for quite some time. And evidently, Donald Trump was the one who had to make a move over there or suffer the consequences of Iran having nuclear weapons in its arsenal. And being a country who has long promised death to America, death to Israel uh, for the last 50 years, and made it unequivocal that it had plans for us that we didn't like to hear about. So it was Donald Trump who pulled the trigger and went into Iran and thumped its military very well. Which, when it comes to China, the thumping of Iran's military was quite a statement to the world, telling in everybody who would listen that China's military defense systems were like a paper tiger.
It's
It
true. It's
didn't
true.
work.
Yeah, it didn't work. And I think it's very important that I think that General Kane and Dan Kane said the U.S. military it's ready globally if anywhere anyone who want to challenge our capability. So I think that the superiority over there it in our military capacity it's outstanding, through this war. And I don't think China is ready at this point because all their top military generals are purged. Their economy is like a free fall, like stone that's free fall. It's been like that, like almost 3 years. So so they're all busy dealing with their internal issues right now,
But we've
and
often talked about Nansu, about how troubles internally would provide the Xi Jinping and the CCP with the opportunity to initiate martial law and take total control of everything. And in doing so, that would give him the opportunity that he really needs to invade Taiwan. So that is a question, a legitimate question on the table today. Is this war in Iran going to provide Xi Jinping with the opportunity, with the impetus, with the drive to, hey, this is my chance. It's not going to get any better than this.
no, no, no,
The
no, no.
U.S. is
That's not
tied
what
up.
we say. No, that's not what we say before. What we say it's when the internal conflict that's going to be out of control.
Yes.
Then Xi Jinping will take action, and China it's not there yet. They don't have to gamble that because they are, to the United States. If we whatever we do in the Middle East, um, we just need a solution there. But in China, if they start this war, then if they cannot win, then that means they're going to lose the regime, right?
Well, yes, that's
So
probably
they're
true
very risky
anytime.
to. That's very risky to them. So I don't think they're ready to do that yet. Because number one, they're not ready, and number two is just internally they're not. The internal situation in China has not reached to the point they feel that the society out of their control.
Not yet. But
Not yet.
I suspect it's their greatest fear. And I suspect in watching what is happening with the people in Iran makes their fear even greater because of the potential for them just to lose control of the people. And control is everything for the CCP.
Well,
It,
they have more to worry about looking at, how U.S. military just decapitate all these Iranian leaders. I think they worry that, uh, you know.
well, it wasn't just the Iranian leaders. You know, we were talking about how the technology of the United States has been demonstrated so far in excess of the ability of Chinese defensive measures to stop them. If you look at how we waltzed right into Venezuela and took the leader right out from underneath everybody without so much as a loss of a life or anything. It was just a spectacular feat. And then pretty much the same thing is true in Iran, only to a much greater extent, because Iran was armed to the teeth and they couldn't stop anything. It was a complete blowout. So as I certainly wouldn't feel awe-inspired by the military if I were Xi Jinping. And furthermore, he's weakened his own military by purging it of its officer corps. And so he doesn't have anybody left to lead anything. And yet, now might be the time because if you look into the future, it doesn't look very promising for China, given its collapse of its demographic profile. When is it going to get to be a better time than right now to invade Taiwan?
Well, they're just not ready, right? To militarily invade Taiwan, it's a major operation, right? You get 100 miles of the strait, then you need to cross. I don't know if they're ready, because they don't know this ahead of time, that they don't know that we're going to attack Iranian regime. So it's not easy, and I think the U.S. intelligence it's closely watching what's been going on in China, specifically, in Chinese military, see how they're moving, and see if they are trying to start war. They have to start, moving their munitions
Sure.
and their militaries and their missiles or their whatever. They're closely watching. And last week that the United States actually, I think one of the military institution, I think it's the Air Force academy. That actually they have a bunch of videos, and then documents published, and about where and how China store their nuclear warhead. They have a lot of details in the document, and even showing, the people working. Basically based on that document, the Chinese military, they just store all their nuclear
In one
warhead
place.
in one place, and right, and it's deeply inside a mountain, and underground, and there's only one road that go in and out of it, and they really know a lot of details. They even know some of the people have a skin problem, and then some of people worry they cannot get a girlfriend or something
There you
because
go.
they're living in the mountain, right? So there is a lot of details being exposed by that. So if think about that. So we are basically warning Beijing that if you're there to move those nuclear weapons, a strike, it's going to come. It's just like how we strike the Iranian regime. So I think that's a clear warning to Beijing.
Now, another clear warning to Beijing was the CIA's efforts to recruit spies within the CCP and within the PLA. As a matter of fact, from what I've heard, which may or may not be true, the CIA, our CIA, has put together social media videos telling people in the PLA and the CCP how to defect or how to reach out to the CIA if they wanted to cooperate. And evidently, it's been rattling nerves in the CCP to a great extent because of what the CCP officials have seen happening to other officials, such as the Ayatollah Khomeini and Maduro. So, we've been able to get very close to the leadership, and we're overtly recruiting members to defect to the U.S. and thus raising a lot of concern within the CCP itself. Um,
Well,
so,
the point, I think it's very important. If U.S. military knows so much about the inside details of a Chinese top secret military weapon program, right? That means there's a lot that they're going to worry about.
and a lot for the CCP to worry about too is who do I trust?
Well, that's
Obviously,
why they're not ready, right? It's a warning sign to them. They if they dare to do anything, uh, I think they're worried. This is another thing to worry. This besides, the capability of U.S. military to decapitate all these Beijing's leaders.
do you think the CCP sees more hope in a political takeover of Taiwan than a military takeover of Taiwan?
Well, they are still working towards that goal.
Yes.
They are trying to they continuously improve their capability that towards their goal. That's why I can say they're just not quite ready yet. And they and the recent news is that their fifth generation supposed to be stealth fighter jets. They're not stealth. Um,
Yeah. Well,
think
as I understand it, they have canards, which are winglets on the front of the jet. And when those winglets are operated, they create a plane that radar can see quite readily. And so they're not stealth at all. It can be seen very easily by radar.
yeah. Well, if you think about that, if they can clearly see they already told the entire world they have the fifth generation stealth plane. That means what? That means basically, how this lie can go out, right? The military, they know they can see their own planes through the radar, but is that the manufacturer lie to fool everybody else around the world, or their military are fool themselves? Right? If they're bought, those airplanes are not cheap. It's really really expensive, right? It's like 20 uh uh it's like it's very it's super super expensive. I forgot a number of it. It's like 270 billion yen.
Ooh,
Uh,
that's a lot. That's a $40 billion.
yeah. It's I don't know yeah, 270 billion yen, if you
Divide by
that's
seven.
30, they're very, very expensive.
Yeah.
They're using
Well,
uh
the interesting thing about the drone war being carried out between Russia and Ukraine and now in Iran is that cheaper seems to be better.
yeah. Well, basically, the question is if the manufacturers say this is the stealth plan, and the military say, okay, we're going to pay a very expensive price to buy your stealth plan. Who is lying there? I mean, the military clearly they can detect those stealth plan, and then they still believe it, and then they still pay a very expensive price to buy it. That means what? That means they both corrupt together, or
That's probably very likely when it gets right down to it, because that's how politicians make money, is by building things and making things, uh, and then getting a budget to do so, and then using that budget to buy cheaper, inputs than you would otherwise do, and that's how you come up with tofu dreg everything in China. Whether it's a bridge or a stealth fighter, it doesn't make any difference.
yeah. Well, Uh, but I don't. It's just kind of bizarre to me, how they're going to get to this point. They clearly can. I don't think they're so stupid that they think this is stealth plan. They just believe it.
Yeah.
It's the way it is, right? It's like a believe their own lines and then spend money.
Well,
Maybe Xi Jinping is the only one who doesn't know.
there you go. And who would tell him, right? Who would tell Xi Jinping that the stealth fighter has no clothes? It's just so that it's probably not going to happen. So Xi Jinping gave his military explicit orders to be ready by the 2027 to invade Taiwan. That's a few months away. And in this process, we watched Nansu, you and I have watched over the past 3 years him purging his military of capability. You're getting rid of all of your leadership, your generals, your admirals. You're getting rid of them all. And there's only on the military commission, there's only two people left, and one of them is Xi Jinping. And that's it. There's nothing there. Um, and you've often said that, well, he's getting rid of people who don't want to invade Taiwan. And maybe it's true that nobody wants to invade Taiwan, and maybe that's why there's nobody left in the military. I don't know.
Well, they are Xi Jinping is getting those top generals, who spend lifetime uh, thinking of the strategy how to invade Taiwan, right? Now, if those are generals actually spend their lifetime doing, thinking about how to win a war and to when it comes to invading Taiwan, then they basically meaning those generals in their mind they know they're not going to win. It's very hard for them to win.
Because they know
It's because they know, right? Because they're the one going to do the job now, and
they
then
know
that.
that the stealth fighter doesn't have any clothes. They know that the tanks don't work as advertised. They know the actual shape of things. And as we were talking about earlier, who's going to tell Xi Jinping that nothing's working as advertised? Nobody's going to tell him that.
Yeah, well, that's interesting. So that's why the last week we saw a purge of a bunch of very high level, top level designers
Yes,
of their fifth generation stealth plane, and then
the radar systems.
the weapon system, yeah, the radar system, all that, right? So
So
I don't know what's going on at this point. Why they just get rid of these people. Maybe it's just because all these weapons that they
nothing's
believe,
working.
yeah, they don't work. It's testing now because they sold these weapons to Venezuela and Iran, so it proved basically they don't work.
It seems like Donald Trump is fighting a very interesting war against China right now by taking on Venezuela, by taking on Iran in such a totally domineering fashion, at least so far, that it would just leave Xi Jinping pretty much flabbergasted and at a loss of what to do next.
Yeah, I don't know. Well, the key here is they don't have that kind of their internal situation have not pushed the regime to the point that they have to start invasion of Taiwan. So I think that's the key. They're still trying to dealing with their economy. They still thinking they have a hope of deal with these economic issues internally. So they're still busy doing that, and they can't start war. And then the social tension in China, it's not to the point that the regime, the communist regime in China, feel it's out of control. It's just not to that point yet.
So what you're saying is that China will not invade Taiwan until until such state that its internal politic, as it were, completely falls apart, until there is riots in the street, until the society just collapses. That is when China will invade Taiwan.
Well, they know, the point, right? They have they know a lot more information internally that we don't know. So basically, that part of a challenge, it's not a huge big enough for them to make the decision to attack Taiwan. So I think that's what's going on.
Okay, so we're looking pretty good then with respect to an invasion of Taiwan. It doesn't look like it's going to happen right away.
Yeah, it doesn't look like it's going to happen right away. Now, and so really, I think both sides they're not talking. They held the meeting between Xi and Trump. It's just because they both sides want to see how the end result it's going to be for the Iranian war.
Okay. Well, ladies and gentlemen, where does that take us now? What does it look like, that Iranian war, and that war in Venezuela, and the war in Cuba, and throughout the Middle East? Because it seems like everything is in play right now. And the major players, Xi Jinping and Donald Trump, are sitting on the sidelines and going, well, there's no sense in talking at this point because I just don't know what to say. Well, ladies and gentlemen, we put two interesting questions on the table today for discussion. The first one, has Iran's military been wiped out or is it just hiding out? waiting for the storm to pass so it can gin up some nukes and raise some holy hell. Second one, will war in the Middle East provide Xi Jinping with the window of opportunity he needs to invade Taiwan? Well, with respect to the first question about Iran's military, we don't know, do we, Nansu?
Well, clearly their military it's not totally destroyed. We just have already destroyed their a lot of their missiles and drones. But the military personnel are still hiding in the underground city, built by the Iranian regime, right? So I'm not sure how many those like 5,000 pounds of bunker master need to be dropped. uh, Maybe some sort of you know some sort of a boots on the ground, that kind of in and out operation is needed. Uh, as long as we don't get to this long, prolonged, a nation building business. We just getting there, trying to destroy their underground city or their force. Maybe that will be enough.
Now, some have said that the United States is working its back channels, talking to senior members of the Iran military, say, hey, if we get rid of these mullahs, would you take over and run this place? Which would seem to be a smart thing for the United States to do. Whether they can find somebody to actually do that, I don't know. But I understand that the religious army is different than the regular army, and that I don't know. I guess the religious army is a little bit like the Chinese Communist Party or something like that. Their job is to suppress domestic dissent, which was different than the job of the Iranian military. So the rumor is that our side has been talking to mucky mucks in their side to see if we can find somebody who will take charge over there and bring some sanity to the Iranian people. Whether that can happen or not, I don't know. Probably nobody knows. And certainly, but that would be a fun thing to explore, as I'm sure we are. But as to whether the Iran's military has been wiped out, we just don't know. They built some very deep tunnels, and that's where they're hiding out.
Yeah, and then we don't know how many missiles and drones are still left in the tunnel, right?
No, I guess there's really no way of knowing without getting into those tunnels and having a look around. And
Well, yeah, I don't think we need to actually go into those tunnels. That would be complex operation. Or if we can just control the exits and entrance of these tunnels, that would be good enough to just to have our weapons that to destroy them.
and what about the missing nuclear materials? Enough nuclear
That's a
material.
challenge. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's a challenge. How we're going to find and look for and identify where the location of those enriched uraniums.
You
That's a
know,
big challenge.
one good thing about achieving air superiority is that we could fly nuclear material detectors around the country and see if we can pick up, the sign the radiation from that stuff. And if we could, maybe we could actually locate where it's at and do something with it.
I have been hoping that maybe Israeli intelligence agencies, Mossad, right? They hoping they actually have some information for us to locate those things.
How smart is the Mossad? We want to
Yeah.
know. Is it
Yeah.
smart enough to find the nukes? Um, because that nuclear material can be turned into nuclear bombs in a very, very short period of time, which it is said was what precipitated Trump's attack on Iran. It was the availability of that nuclear material. Uh, and the Iranian ambassadors actually told us, we have it. We have the material, and it's our right to do with it what we want. And our response to them was, President Trump asserts that it's his right to stop you from doing that. And
Yep.
so that's where we're at right now. And ladies and gentlemen, if we don't get that material, we're all in for some pretty tough times. Because with 10 good nukes, you can really stir up a lot of trouble in the world. And that's what we're trying to stop.
Well, the key here is, you look at all our NATO European allies, they're not really responsible at this moment. That's the problem. I think that if they can protect their ships, at least their own ships, in the Strait of Hormuz, at least they're doing their own their share. We're not asking them to join the war against Iran. They just need to protect their own ships,
I
and they
think,
don't even want to do that.
yeah, I think what Trump was trying to set up was an international coalition of nations that would provide ships so that the Iranians would know whose ship they were shooting at, and therefore would be more reluctant to stop shooting. So the question now before us is that can we stop them from blockading the Straits of Hormuz? Can we get our hands on their nuclear material? Can we somehow find somebody with some sanity that would like to bring Iran back into the community of nations? Because it isn't involved in the community of nations anymore. It's just Iran and China standing up against the world.
Yeah, I'm just trying to find out can our military do uh uh airborne
Well,
uh
I know they have airborne detectors. I know that
who has a
the United States has them because they will actually have uh, exercises in which they will fly these airplanes around cities to see if they can spot the fissionable material. So I know that it's there, and
Yeah, well, guess what the AI says?
what is AI?
AI says based on the reports from March 2026, the US military has the capability to conduct an airborne or heliborne mission on Kark Island, and it has been considered a potential, though highly risky, option for boots on the ground to secure Iran's primary oil export hub.
Yeah,
So I think we can do it without, sending the amphibious ships going through the Strait of Hormuz. Because Karg Island is at the very upper end of that Persian Gulf, right?
yeah. Well, what we want, I think, as a nation, is for Iran to be able to sell its oil and to use the proceeds of that oil sale to build a nation that relies on something besides rockets and drones to get along with its neighbors. And I don't know if that's possible given the current theocracy that runs the place. You know, these people have direct access to God, and You
Well,
know,
I think that the key is the pressure. It's just not big enough yet. You need to give in, enough pressure so they will have to sit down and then offer some sort of surrender condition that's good enough for the U.S. government to move forward with it. Um, and then I think that the only way to put that kind of pressure on the regime is to basically take over the Cargo Island. Once you have the Cargo Island in our hands, then they can't get any money. Their financial resources are going to be all cut off, and they realize they have to sit down to talk to us.
but even if we get control of Karg Island, they still control the Hormuz Strait.
Well, then we just have to, all of us, we just have to live with a high oil price for a period of time. It's not going to be very long, it's just going to be a few months. The U.S. oil industries are going back to Venezuela. Venezuela, before the country nationalized the oil industry, they their total production used to be more than 3 million barrels a day. Now they're making less than 1 million barrels, and then they can easily bump up. We don't know how fast, maybe 6 to 8 months. Then they can, if they are able to bump up their oil per total production, they will make up the production lost, from Iran because Iran only make what total 1.4, around 1.4 million barrels a day. We can if we can have more oils coming from Venezuela, we will be able to make up that the difference.
There was a very interesting situation happened recently, very recently, this past week, I believe, in which a Venezuelan national baseball or soccer or some kind of team played its counterpart here in the United States. And the Venezuela team beat the American team. And President Trump issued a one-word statement via his social media platform and said, "Statehood?" question mark, suggesting that Venezuela would make a good state of the Union because it has all of this oil. And it's an interesting comment, but it is about oil, and that is what Trump has succeeded in doing, as you mentioned earlier, Nansu, was whereas China had rare earths monopoly, and that was its principal weapon. Trump turned the tables on them by making oil the principal weapon. And China relies on maritime trade to get its oil. It relies on ships at sea. And there's no better example of how vulnerable that makes you than this situation that's going on in the Hormuz Straits, where the Iranian people essentially have able to shut down the world's trade in oil from the Gulf states.
Yeah, that's going to be. They say it's going to take about a week for the amphibious attack ship that carries the U.S. Marine Force to reach the Strait of Hormuz. And I don't know what the next step of military action will be. That will be interesting. But still, even yesterday, Trump says we are ahead of our schedule. So hopefully, because based on the first day, the Pentagon press release, uh, which was given by Hexas and General Dan Kane, that all these military plans. All this military planning, strategic planning, how we're going to carry all these this attack to the Iranian regime has been, thought about and planned about, and uh, for years.
right?
They have this plan for years, many years. So they already think and rethink and think and rethink again and again, until we start doing exercise all these plans. It's just take a leadership to give the order of go. Let's go for it. And I think Trump has that gut to make that decision. So they're carrying forward a plan that's been discussed for many years. So hopefully they know, because we until this point we don't have enough military inside information, and then we just it's very hard for the for us to know to actually get make a reasonable guess of what the next step would be.
Well, hopefully we have enough information gathering abilities to figure things out. I know that our allies in Israel have been doing a great job of gathering information, and boy, have has that ever helped. Um, but the question is, can can yeah, I guess we're at a standoff when it gets right down to it. You have Xi Jinping who's not going to do anything until he sees how this war shapes up. So we have to win this war in Iran.
Yeah, of course. Well, at least we have to be able to reach all the
Somehow we have to free the flow of oil.
yeah, we need to. I think that the military plan, because I think the current it's kind of like you don't see in the last several days the besides decapitating several top leadership in the in Iranian regime. Kind of like it quiet down a little bit, although the bombings start continue is still continuing, but you don't see um you don't see much of news going on. And I think it's all because we are ahead of ourselves in the schedule.
We've accomplished more than we thought we would have accomplished.
Yeah,
And yeah,
I think the original military plan that's been discussed and prepared for many years, they didn't predict that in the first day of the strike, we will be able to decapitate all these military leaders and and the top Iranian regime leaders. I don't think that was a part of the plan. And that's why they don't have a coordination at all. You see, all
yeah.
can they can do is just they're hiding on the ground.
And
And
shooting
then
rockets at whoever they want to shoot rockets at because there's nobody around to tell them what to do anymore.
that's right. That's why then you can see that they're all their efforts, their leaders are saying, "Hey, don't attack our neighbors," but then you still seeing the missiles attacking all their neighbors. So I think they're kind of in the chaos now. But however, at the same time, it's because we are way ahead of our own schedule. So there will be some coordination and some actions need to take place, like sending all these Marines to the Middle East. It will take some time.
So we're kind of at a stalemate. We've got so far, we've kind of wiped out the surface of their military capabilities. We've learned that the defensive uh, s- systems sold by China to the world to stop stealth aircraft, to stop the Americans, has been totally worthless. um, demonstrably worthless and embarrassingly so for the Chinese Communist Party, worthless. So we're at this standoff now. What's next? And that's pretty much
Well, I think that you know somehow it it it's very hard to open up the Strait of Hormuz. I think it's very hard because think about it, they don't need the missiles to block that strait. All
really
they need is just
mines
their cannons.
or mines.
No, 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 no. They're just they're cannons. It'll be
Yeah,
enough because they're shells, cannons.
yeah,
You know, the Hormuz was what 30, 40 miles, and then but however the channel that's going to allow the oil tank to go through is just like 3, 4 miles,
yeah.
right? And then it's
Sitting ducks.
1,120 feet.
Jesus. What
So the
what
ships are like sitting ducks steaming in and out of the Persian Gulf.
Yeah, if they just use they don't even have to use drones and missiles. If they use cells and cannons, all these things,
Or lay some mines or
well,
use
mines
some
are, the mine laying ships are totally destroyed, right?
yeah.
Uh, but I think
Well,
that
they could
if
go
they,
out there with a rowboat, you know, push the mine over and there you go. Uh and
well,
then there's um there's incredible efficient drones that they have really put on the world. And they can attack with swarms of drones, which is so it's a tough fight to block to stop them from blocking the Hormuz Strait. It
you
is a
know that
choke point.
either way, the gas price increase is not going to last very long because uh either we can get more oils from Venezuela, or they can do more, they can do some, construction to get more oils from the Red Sea.
Yeah.
So
The trouble
either
with
way, this crisis is not going to last very long. It's just that, just few months of time they can get it done.
well,
The
that's the trouble though, because for Trump, he is facing an election, a midterm election. And he needs to win that election, or the opposition is going to take over, and it's going to be 2 more years of absolute chaos.
Well, what Trump facing if he doesn't do it now, maybe after election he will never be able to do it. So he has to do it now, right?
Has to, you know.
So
Somehow he has to keep a reasonable supply of oil moving, at least into the United States, so that the price of oil doesn't go through the roof.
well, the oil it's an international market,
Yeah,
so so the only way he'll be able to do it, it's get more oils
or oil onto the world market. Yeah.
yeah, into the world market. It's either find a way to get they say they will find a way to get the Iraqi oil, by going through Turkey or something. I don't know how that it's going to work. If they build a new pipeline, that's going to take some months, and it's not going to be quicker than we are getting the oil from Venezuela. So how they're going to do it, I don't know. We're just waiting to see, and I hope the delay right now. It's just because we are ahead of our schedule. So our military, they're not really ready because the perfect opportunity presented itself were able to decapitate Khamenei and all these top military leaders, and they just started. And that's not. I think that's the only part that was not in the original planning. And so that's why it resulting, the situation facing us right now. It's like we are running ahead of us.
Well, that would be good.
Yeah.
And that would be good. That would suggest that we have plans that we're waiting to execute, which would be
Hmm.
good. And we hope that is indeed the case. Wow. It is an interesting times we live in, and it's kind of frightening when it gets right down to it because we just don't know what could happen. What we fear is that Iran will take its nuclear materials, build some bombs, and raise holy hell, and that's why we are in Iran. Ladies and gentlemen, this has been China Now for the 278th edition of China Now. Thank you all for tuning in. We hope you'll stay tuned as we come back next week, same time, same place, because you know the world is going to change a lot between then and now, and we will come back and tell you all about it. So thank you all for tuning in. Thank you, Nansu. And thank you all.